Hello. I see you've come back for another serving of the bizarre. I am Lafayette Faust, and I tell the twisted tales from my secret bunker here in Nevermore Hollows. And tonight, bizarre is definitely on the menu. A few weeks back, a young man with no ambition, working the graveyard shift at a dead-end job, experienced something so strange that he found his life's calling. Now, I know that sounds odd, but sometimes it takes tragedy to motivate us into a life of purpose. So, with that little nugget eating away at your mind, I invite you to sit back, turn on a light, and prepare yourself. Axl Kilgore loved working the graveyard shift at Bernie's Gas and Go. It was a hell of a lot better than working the other shifts because it was slower, and the folks who did shuffle in throughout the night were a lot more colorful than the daytime folks. You never knew how they would look or act or what they would say. Just the other night, Lenny Johnson stumbled in with wild eyes and a torn shirt. He claimed to have been attacked by a bunch of kids with soulless black eyes. "I ain't shitting you, bro," he said. "I was just walking down the road, minding my own business, when 5 kids came out of the tobacco fields and attacked me. I felt this evil radiating off of them, and their eyes were completely black, and they kept saying they were hungry while they grabbed at me and tried to pull me into the field." Bernie's Gas and Go was located at the junction of Main Street and County Road 33. It was the last gas station on the east side of town, beyond which was 40 miles of dark country road lined with fields of tobacco and corn before arriving at the next town. Most of the townsfolk chose to ignore the fact that Nevermore was a nexus of the paranormal and the strange. But not Axl. He believed in the paranormal, though he'd never actually had a paranormal experience. Either way, given the town's reputation, he felt that if Lenny was stupid enough to walk down a dark road at midnight, he deserved to be attacked by a bunch of evil kids. "So, how did you get away from them?" Axl asked. Lenny was still breathing hard from his encounter. "Okay, I ain't gonna lie to you, bro. I just started punching kids. I mean, if you come at me, bro, you gonna get knocked the hell out. One of them tried to bite me. I think I broke his nose. After a while, they just gave up and went back into the tobacco field. Then I done ran my ass here. Man, I need a drink." Lenny grabbed a bottle of beer from one of the coolers and popped the top and took a long gulp. Even though Axl thought he deserved what he got by being stupid, he didn't charge him for the beer. Lenny, nerves calmed by Schlitz, left the store and braved the mile-long walk into town. The store was now empty of customers, and Axl stepped out into the parking lot to get some air. The full moon peered down from the dark sky like the bulging eye of a lunatic. Bob, the guy who worked the graveyard shift when Axl didn't, told him that the full moon nights were the craziest, but so far, other than Lenny, it had been quiet. Bernie's wasn't one of those large chain gas stations with multiple rows of pumps and a massive store. Instead, it sported only 2 pumps under a lighted canopy. The fluorescent lights hummed like angry bees and cast a sickly yellow glow that barely reached to the road. A couple of the lights occasionally flickered, causing the shadows to twitch as if they were nervous spirits. The store was small, selling items that ranged from candy, soda, and beer to overpriced oil and lighters. That was until this morning. Bernie, an eccentric man of 50 who dressed in seersucker suits and bow ties, decided he was going to begin selling sushi. He installed an 8-foot wide open cooler and stocked everything from California rolls to sashimi and even 2 rolls of sushi made of eel and octopus. Axl thought it was a bad idea to sell gas station sushi. He could visualize someone grabbing a pack of sashimi for the road and ending up with salmonella and puking their guts out in a ditch. But hey, Bernie was a successful entrepreneur and a genuinely good guy who paid well and cared about his customers. So if he thought that gas station sushi was a good idea, who was Axl to think different? He heard the rumble of an engine coming down the county road. A moment later he saw the flare of headlights as the car approached. It was a cherry red 1961 Chrysler 300 coupe with cat-eye headlights and flamboyant tail fins. It turned into the station and parked beside one of the pumps. Axl went back inside the store and stepped behind the counter. He turned on the pump, but no one got out of the car. It just sat there under the sickly yellow glow. After 5 long minutes, the driver's door swung open and an old man wearing a purple suit and a black top hat stepped out and made his way around to the passenger side. He opened the door and helped an elderly woman out of the car. She was dressed like a beatnik in black turtleneck and trousers topped off with a black beret. Instead of getting gas, they walked across the lot and into the store. Axl could now see that the woman was indeed quite old, with a lined face and her gray hair spilling out from under the beret in a pixie cut. Just by looking at her, Axl would have thought she was at least 80, but she walked with the youthful grace of a teenager. Once inside the store, the odd couple split, with the woman walking toward the back of the store and the man walking over to the counter. He looked as old as the woman, though with fewer wrinkles. He had a salt and pepper Van Dyke and wore small round glasses. Axl saw that his top hat had a satin band sporting an iridescent feather. The man offered his hand. "What's your name, son?" Axl shook his hand. "Axl, what can I do for you?" "Oh, nothing," the man said. "I'm just here waiting for her. I'm Vincent Cheshire." Axl smiled. "Nice to meet you." "Seems a bit slow tonight," Vincent said, glancing around the store. Axl shrugged. "Yeah, this isn't exactly the most exciting place to work, but I do get the occasional colorful character." Vincent thoughtfully tugged at his pointy beard. "How do you keep yourself entertained?" "I'm a reader. I brought a really good book." Vincent nodded. "I see. And what do you like to read?" "Mostly thrillers and horror," Axl said, "but I also read a lot of comic books." "Ah, I do love a good graphic novel," Vincent said. Axl was impressed that this old geezer referred to comic books as graphic novels, which was a more accurate description. "What kind of stuff do you read, Vincent?" Vincent gave a smile that did justice to his last name, and there was a playful twinkle in his eye. "Anything spooky. And when it comes to the graphic novels, I have a predilection for the old Tales from the Crypt stuff. I do love a good scare. It keeps me young." "How about you, Axl? Do you like a good scare?" "I do," he replied. "That's pretty much all I read." Vincent turned and called out to the woman, "Dear, come, let me introduce you to Axl. He's very much into horror." The old woman sauntered up beside Vincent. Her face was wrinkled, but her eyes sparkled with vitality. She offered her hand. The skin was crepe thin and mottled with age spots. "I'm Phrygia Whitechapel." Axl was bemused by this odd elderly couple. He was picking up what they were laying down. If nothing else, it was helping pass the time. "Phrygia is such an unusual name," he said. The old woman smiled and gave a coquettish shrug, clearly taking the comment as a compliment. "Why, thank you. It's ancient. So, you like a good scare? Tell me about the book you brought to read." Axl plucked the book from the counter behind him and held it up. Lovecraft. Vincent raised his left hand and snapped his fingers, which Axl found odd. Then he said, "Ah, the Dunwich Horror. One of my favorites." "Oh, I do enjoy a good Lovecraftian story," Phrygia said. "Is the sushi safe to eat, or will it cause me to have waking nightmares?" Again, Vincent snapped his fingers. Axl felt an odd sensation creep through him. He felt as if there was imminent danger, though surely not from this quirky old couple who seemed so nice. He realized that his eyes were picking up more detail, the colors were more vivid, and he felt edgy. I'm sure it's fine. Bernie, the owner, just stocked it earlier today. I wouldn't imagine it would make you sick or cause any nightmares, waking or asleep." Vincent turned to Phrygia. "Does the idea of sushi excite you, dear?" "Yes, Vincent, I believe so. But first, young man, I need to know, your sushi, does it writhe and squirm and bite?" This time, when Vincent snapped his fingers, a deep hum began to emanate from the back of the store. It grew into a crescendo that filled the air with ominous intent. Axl looked beyond Vincent and Phrygia to the cooler and noticed that all the sushi had begun to wriggle and writhe. Then, a small tentacle popped out of one of the rice-covered rolls. It tentatively explored the air. Another tentacle pushed its way out of the roll, and then another, until there were 7 of them, writhing and squirming in the air. The tentacles began to grow, doubling in size every few seconds. "What the hell is going on?" Axl said. Rolls on one of the shelves burst open with slick, squirming eels. Others exploded open, revealing a half-dozen crabs that skittered out of the cooler and ran across the floor. "What the hell is happening?" Axl said. The slightest detail stood out in sharp contrast. He saw that the crabs were covered not in a hard chitinous shell, but in human skin that seemed to be prickling with goosebumps. The rows of suckers on the underside of the octopus tentacles were filled with human teeth. Axl tore his gaze away from the metamorphosing sushi and looked at Vincent and noticed that the man's eyes had turned a deep red. No pupil, no irises, just glistening red orbs. His smile was freakishly wide and framed with too many teeth. He looked at Phrygia. Her eyes were also red, and when she opened her mouth, he saw rows and rows of serrated shark teeth. Axl reached under the counter and grabbed the shotgun that Bernie kept there for protection. He pointed it at Vincent and said, "What are you?" The hum became not louder but deeper, causing everything in the store to vibrate. Axl felt it in his skin, his bones, his organs. A disturbing idea popped in his head that the hum was resonating on a dark frequency, and that if he allowed his body to come in tune with it, he would cease to exist. He shot a quick glance at the back of the store. The tentacles were now as thick as his leg and still growing. He could see the massive bulbous head of the octopus materialize out of the sushi. When it grew beyond the cooler, Axl realized that it had too many eyes to be just an octopus. There were dozens of eyes, all rolling and glaring in different directions. He counted 4 eels, now easily 6 feet in length. They were slithering around the back of the store, knocking items from the shelves. The crabs, with their human skin, skittered up the walls and ceiling and were headed his way. He raised a shotgun and fired off a shot. One of the crabs exploded in gore that was more human than crab. He fired off another round, and another, and two more of the crabs exploded in a shower of human blood. The octopus seemed to have reached its full size. The bulbous head was massive, filling up a whole corner of the store. 8 thick tentacles thrashed about, breaking the plate glass window that looked out onto the dark night and smashing the icy machine. Thick, cherry-colored icy splattered the walls and the floor. One of the tentacles shot out toward the front of the store. It was impossibly long, heading straight for Axl. The rows of suckers with human teeth were opening and closing as if hungry for the taste of his flesh. He fired off a shot, blowing off a sizable portion of the tentacle. Fear surged through Axl, and he felt the vibrations in his body shift as they seemed to come closer into tune with the deep hum. His fear surged through him like he had never experienced. It was all-consuming. He knew without any doubt that he was going to die. He was going to get eaten by these slithering, thrashing sea monsters. Something fell onto his shoulder. It was one of the crabs. No longer in control of himself, he dropped the shotgun and swatted the crab, knocking it onto the counter. Just then, Vincent and Phrygia lurched forward, and each grabbed an arm and pulled him over the counter and dropped him onto the floor. He lay on his back, so utterly consumed with fear that he could not move. He saw the thick tentacles writhe into view above him. He heard the slithering of the massive eels as they slimed their way around the store, crashing into displays and shelves. He felt the crabs skittering across his legs and wished that he had not worn shorts because the feeling of the crabs on his legs was disgusting. He was covered in fear sweat. It oozed from his pores in copious amounts. His shirt clung wetly to his body. Vincent and Phrygia knelt beside him. He was unable to move any part of his body except his eyes. He cut them toward Vincent. The man opened his mouth, and a long black tongue squirmed out. It was thick and black and split in two at the tip. He leaned over and began to lick Axl's face. The tongue was rough like that of a cat. As Vincent licked, he began to moan in ecstasy. Axl cut his eyes to Phrygia. She also knelt beside him, her hands raised in supplication as if in praise. She then leaned over and breathed in his breath. She groaned as if she were in complete delight. That's when he realized what was happening. Vincent was licking the fear sweat from his face, feeding off of it. His forked tongue with its sandpaper roughness slowly lapped across his eyes, his forehead, his chin, and, oh dear Lord, his lips. And Phrygia was breathing in his fear breath. One of the massive tentacles hovered into view. Dozens of tiny mouths opened and closed in hungry expectation. It wrapped itself around his arm, and Axl felt the pain as dozens of tiny mouths nibbled at his flesh. Then he passed out. He floated in a black void that was infinite. The only sound was the deep hum that permeated every cell of his body. He could still feel Vincent Cheshire's scratchy, forked tongue licking his forehead, his cheeks, his eyes, and his neck. He felt Phrygia's face inches from his and could hear her sucking in his breath as he rapidly exhaled. He tried to scream, but only a desperate mewing escaped his lips. His mind teetered at the edge of insanity. He felt it wobble and sway, and just as he began to lose himself, he heard Vincent snap his fingers. The fear was instantly gone. There was no more licking, nibbling, skittering. His breath was no longer being sucked from him. His eyes popped open, and he looked up into the faces of Vincent and Phrygia, which had returned to normal. No more blood-red eyes, no more impossibly wide mouths filled with shark teeth. Vincent's smile had returned to normal, and he had a curious twinkle in his eyes. "Easy," he said. "You passed out, and I caught you before you hit the ground, so I don't think you're injured." "Let's get him to his feet," Phrygia said. Axl was confused, though he felt as if he had taken the best sleep of his life. His muscles were relaxed to the point that he had to lean on Vincent and Phrygia after they helped him to his feet. They didn't let go until he was steady. "Wait, what's going on here? I don't understand." He jerked away from the couple and backed up against the counter. "Stay away from me," he said, looking around for the giant octopus, the eels, and the crabs. In addition to feeling more rested than any other time in his life, his mind was clear, as if he had just completed deep meditation in a Buddhist temple. When he applied that focus to his surroundings, he noticed everything was in complete order. The sushi monsters were gone. The merchandise was on the shelves as if it had never been disturbed. The front window was no longer broken. Phrygia spoke. "Everything is fine. There's nothing to fear. Everything is going to be okay." "No," Axl said. "You both had red eyes, crazy wide mouths, and the sushi, it came alive. It attacked me while you two licked my face and stole my breath." Vincent raised an eyebrow and said, "I caught you when you passed out, so I know you didn't hit your head. Maybe you ate something that caused this hallucination and subsequent fainting." Phrygia glanced over her shoulder. "Could be the sushi. I've heard that certain types of fish can cause hallucinations if not properly prepared." "No," Axl said. "That's not it. I didn't eat any of it. What did you two do to me?" Vincent looked surprised. "We haven't done anything to you except help you." Axl suddenly realized that Vincent and Phrygia were no longer old. They had both seemed in their late 70s or early 80s when they walked in, but now they appeared to be no older than 30. "I think he's steady enough," Vincent said. Phrygia reached out and put a hand on Axl's arm, as if confirming Vincent's assessment. Her touch caused Axl to cringe. "What are you?" Vincent turned to Phrygia, and they exchanged a grin that suggested they knew something that Axl did not. "Come, dear. It's time to leave." With that, they turned and exited the store. Axl watched them get into their cherry-red Chrysler and drive out of the jaundiced glow of the gas station light and into the dark night. He stood in place, his mind reeling as he tried to understand what had happened. He was no longer scared. In fact, he continued to feel profoundly relaxed and clear-minded. After a long while, he decided that maybe Vincent and Phrygia were correct about the sushi being tainted. He could have become exposed when he had straightened the stock earlier in the night. Maybe he had hallucinated the whole thing. It made sense. He had been reading a Lovecraft novel, and anyone who had ever read Lovecraft knew that he wrote a lot about giant octopus-like creatures that caused terrible fear and madness. Or maybe they had been hypnotists. Vincent did snap his fingers as if to distract him, and Phrygia did speak in an odd, soothing voice. Maybe they had hypnotized him for some twisted reason. Yes, that had to be it, he thought. That's the only thing that makes sense. Either hypnotism or hallucinogenic sushi or both. But he had to be sure. He grabbed a pair of work gloves from behind the counter and walked to the sushi cooler. He began carefully rummaging through, looking for any sign that the sushi had metamorphosed into Lovecraftian monsters. He was relieved to find no evidence. He retrieved a garbage bag from the stockroom and began tossing the sushi inside. When he got to the last row of crab rolls, he noticed that they had sprouted crab-like legs that were covered in human skin. He jerked his hand back, and that's when he noticed the bite marks on his forearm. They were in the shape of tiny mouths. The crab rolls did not move. They were clearly dead. He had to choose to accept the reality of this or go mad. So he steeled himself and grimaced as he grabbed the rest of the sushi and tossed it into the garbage can. He dragged the can around the back of the potato chip display and found the tip of the tentacle that he had severed with the shotgun blast. It was about 2 feet long, its underside covered with tiny mouths with human teeth. He tossed it into the garbage and drug it all out back away from the store. He squirted lighter fluid onto the whole mess and tossed a match on it and watched it burn. As he watched the flames dance their flickering demon dance, he replayed the whole event in his mind, trying to understand. Phrygia and Vincent were obviously paranormal beings. They ate fear to stay young. They clearly possessed some supernatural power that they used to cause the sushi to metamorphose so that Axl would experience the type of fear that they craved. Vincent's finger snapping and Phrygia's smooth way of speaking were clearly meant to put him into a light trance that kept him from running away when the things got crazy. Axl realized he had been violated physically and mentally and emotionally. He had been manipulated just so these monsters could feed off him. He was sickened at the thought, and waves of nausea washed over him. He focused on the flames, watched the sushi burn. The tentacles sizzled and shriveled. The flesh-covered crab legs crackled, and his nausea subsided. It was replaced with a righteous anger. When everything had been burned, he went back inside and counted down the register and closed the store. He would figure out what to tell Bernie later, but right now he had been given a clear calling for his life. He did not want anyone to ever suffer the violation he had just experienced. So he had to hunt down Vincent and Phrygia and kill them, and any other paranormal being that he might come across. He didn't know how to hunt them or even how to kill them, but he would figure it all out. Right now he was convicted of the righteousness of his new purpose, and he knew the first step was to simply begin tracking them down. So he slid behind the wheel of his old Ford truck and pulled onto the black ribbon of road. And with the pale light of the moon leading his way, he began his hunt.